Welcome back to The Grind for another Act 7.2 guide. This is going to be quest number 4. In this lane, we have Mixmaster, Light 'em Up, and Counter Strike plus vulnerabilities. If you bring a champion that easily inflicts Incinerate and Shock, you will not have to worry about Mixmaster at all. And so the goal is just to bring Incinerate and Shock champions. Human Torch has very easy access to Incinerate, so you do not have to worry about Mixmaster at all. And he works great for the first fight, which is Black Widow Clairvoyant. Now, technically, you do not have to bring champions that do Incinerate and Shock, but it would be silly not to. If you are short on champions that do this, then you can just parry light, medium, and you will never have to worry about Mixmaster either. Or you can bring evade counters to shut down the evade and fight normally as well. Now, with Incinerate and Shock champions, you also get more damage because there's also Incinerate and Shock vulnerability. Now, if you have a champion that can, at least for a short period of time, inflict both of these debuffs, you will be able to maximize your damage potential, but having just one of them is still very nice because you'll have 200% increased damage throughout the entire fight if you can constantly have a Shock or Incinerate active while you're also shutting down the Mixmaster evade. Now, this lane also has Counter Strike, so every time you dex one of the opponent's attacks, you will get a Fury buff, which will increase your damage, but once you hit 10, the opponent's next attack will be unblockable. So that's something you'll have to keep in mind, but a lot of the time you don't actually need to dex that many times and it won't end up going over the 10 stacks. Now, Dr. Doom is another fantastic option because he applies a Shock buff on his medium attack. So if you start with a medium attack when there is no Shock active, then you will trigger it and have the ability to reduce the evade for the entire 5-hit combo, and you really don't have to worry too much about how you do your attacks because you'll be able to bypass Mixmaster altogether. Now, another nice thing about Dr. Doom is his Special 2 has Incinerate damage as well. So once you throw off your Special 2, the Incinerates have a pretty decent duration, and so once you go back in for your next combo, you'll start with a medium attack, and therefore you'll have a Shock and Incinerate damage at the same time, giving you further increased damage for the next combo. The next fight is against Yondu, and this is a pretty straightforward fight. If you're used to fighting Yondu, the things to remember is you don't want to try to parry a light attack. So after you finish a combo, it's best to dash back, wait for him to dash in, and then parry that to get your ins. But he has pretty straightforward Special 1. Just try not to push him to Special 2. We don't want to finish watching the whole fight because there's not really a whole lot to it, but we'll watch a little bit more of Black Widow Deadly Origin a little bit later, who also is very great for this lane because of the very easy access to Shock. Now, Sunspot is another top champion for this path because he applies an Incinerate with every hit. So once again, you do not have to worry about Mixmaster at all. And with Elsa Bloodstone, the main thing you want to consider is you don't want to apply a bleed to her unless you are a mutant champion, but since you're focusing mostly on Incinerate and Shock, you probably won't be bringing a champion that bleeds anyways. So now we've thrown off 3 Special 1s. We've got 3 of those solar flares, I believe they're called. So now we're building up to a Special 2. We're going to throw that off shortly here, and she's currently at 50% health, but once we throw off the Special 2, she just disappears. Now, the next fight is arguably the hardest, or I would say the hardest fight on this path. It is Iron Man Infinity War. So he's a very annoying champion to fight in general, so you might want to consider bringing a specific champion and saving him for this fight, but Human Torch worked pretty well for me. Another option would be Magneto. You could bring Red Magneto and just counter Iron Man Infinity War because you'll just be doing heavy attacks, and since Iron Man Infinity War is metal, you'll be able to shut down a lot of his abilities. So that is an option that you might want to consider if you maybe don't have enough solid counters for this lane. Human Torch worked fairly well for me, so that's something that you could consider doing as well, and just trying to get up to Nova Flame as much as possible, maybe throw off a Special 3 in order to get more access to it. But remember that if you're not inflicting Incinerates, then he will be able to evade with Mixmaster. But if you've built up enough charges, then the Incinerates might last through the duration of your Nova Flame, and therefore you'll have the ability to counter it to begin with. Now, here's an example of one time where we actually go over 10 Furies from dexing, and that's going to make the opponent unblockable for the next period of time. But other than that, we're going to skip ahead to the final fight on this path, which is Spider Gwen. She has evade in her kit as well, so sometimes with the very first hit, if you do not have a Shock or Incinerate active, she could evade, but it's hard for them to counter after the first hit, so you'll probably end up being okay. Black Widow Deadly Origin works very nicely because she has very high damage output, plus you add on the constant shocks, so you're having the increased damage from shock vulnerability. She can burn through fights quite quickly. So we get up to a special 2 and throw off one special 2 and the fight is over. So a lot of fun using her on this lane. Let me know what champions you used. Let me know if you struggled with any fights in particular. I do hope this video was helpful. Good luck, and I'll see you in the next video.